it took me a longer time to just fall in love. I didn't know that it still existed. Until I met this Kapana guy in a bar who magically just turned my whole world upside down.
That's to say, please make some noise for Adriana Visage! This is supposed to be the roaming mic, but for now I'm going to keep it to me. Like I don't know it, great, no it. Now let's just start off with our first question to our director, Mr. Philippe. Now, Philippe, we just wanted to find out from you, what inspired you to write this specific film?
I did not write it. Mikiros and Hanga wrote it.
Ooh, so make some noise for Mikiros and Hanga Brokorov!
But what inspired me was the fact that it's relevant. We, as OU, we work on social issues and we try to right the wrongs somehow, but we don't have all the answers. And obviously, it's wrong that you cannot love who you want to love simply because someone 19 years ago, or 80 years ago, whatever, decided that it was wrong. So we just wanted to talk about it in a way that would not alienate people who are maybe a bit more homophobe. And often you are homophobe because you don't really know what is happening and you don't put faces on people. We look at what is happening in Africa in terms of LGBT movies, and a lot of movies are very dramatic. I mean, if you take Muffins of Africa, Ife in Nigeria, Rafiki in Kenya, they all are beautiful movies but very dramatic. And if you are a young LGBT person and you look for representation and you look at those films, you think, oh, my life would be a misery. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted to have a film where people could feel, okay, it's not easy. It's never easy to love. Doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, it's not easy to love, but it's also not impossible. And that's what we wanted to do.
Now, on the note of representation, Adriano, as a colored man in Namibia, taking on a role like this, and we know how the stigma is in our communities, what angle did you take when you took this role on?
So after I read this script, it took me a week to get back to Philippe because Philippe and I worked together on my debut film, which was Salute. And when I read this script, it was the navigation of HIV/AIDS, which is something that's not being spoken of. Also people go into relationships without getting tested. Most importantly for me particularly, it was really about representation in terms of the colored community. We don't see ourselves a lot on TV. The demographic for colored people in Namibia, and I need to say this, is so little. I never grew up seeing someone like myself on TV, more or less filler, who plays my mom, and here is a beautiful colored house set, you know, and family that accepts this young man for who he is. And when I read it, it was an honor to not just work with Philippe again, but to work with Felicity Philander, Salento, and also Elise De Vere, because these are people whose shoulders we've, you know, that have carried the industry for so long. So it was a yay, and I wanted to work with them and really portray this story as authentic as possible. And I think George just has a lot of balls. Yeah, I don't think I would have done what George did, and that for me was really having to tell this story as authentic as possible.
Now, ons eie mummy van die community. Hey. Now you were representing the mothers of the country. You were the voice for the moms. When you took on this specific role, what drew you to speak about this narrative? What made you go, you know, I want to represent mothers in this country and show that there's a different side to how you can approach your children, especially when they are coming out and when they deal with these types of stigmas in the country?
Rodelio, yes. Initially, when I spoke to Philippe and I became aware of it would be an LGBTQ movie, I had to first think about it in terms of my background and where I come from, a very conservative background, and I had to decide whether I am prepared to stand whatever I will face in future. I come from Rehoboth, you know Rehoboth's people, very conservative, yes, but in the end, the artist in me decided. And with that, during the movie, I became aware that, no matter what, and yes, I thought about it before as well, a mother remains a mother. Whether your child is straight, gay, whatever the case, bisexual, whatever the case might be, you still love your child, no matter what. And as a parent, you will take that decision to stand by your child. Many parents might not do that, and in today's community in Namibia, I also know that there are parents who do not do that. But I decided to play this role and to project that so that people can become aware and parents can become aware that their child, no matter the sex, the child has feelings, the child can love, the child can be free to love whoever that child wants to, and you as a parent can still stand by your child. And it was great. Thank you.
Ike is a hater. Now, Philippe, you in the film, there's a moment where we see one of our characters discussing the understanding of what PrEP is all about and just destigmatizing the whole conversation around HIV and how it's transmitted and the fact that there are preventative measures that you can of course take. Why was it important for you to highlight that in this specific film?
That was the most difficult scene. When we talk about funding for movie, it's quite difficult to find funding for movie in Namibia. And VIV was interested in doing this movie, but they really had a component, they really wanted us to talk about PrEP, ARVs, and those things. And it's quite tricky because it can very quickly become an educational movie and feel like we are preaching about ARVs, we are preaching about PrEP. So we had to find out how will it come sort of naturally in the conversation. And that's one scene actually that I found very interesting, because as much as the family of George is very open-minded, they don't talk. The only thing they talk about is food, game, the controller. They don't have any serious conversation. When Simon, who is from this very, we don't address those issues at all, this is a no-go, when eventually he's got a discussion with his sister, he actually has a discussion. They actually talk about it. And I really like that. I really like that scene. And I felt it was giving Simeon and his sister a little moment that was quite precious, actually. And again, we assume often that if my sister discovers, if my cousin discovers, if my uncle discovers to be a disaster, and actually maybe no. Maybe like the sister, when she discovers it, it's not a disaster. It's opening the door for an actual conversation. And their conversation is actually stronger than anything George has with his family or his friends.
Beautiful, thank you so much, Philippe. Over to Adriano, I wanted to find out from you, there is a very interesting dynamic with your character where you are in this corporate setting, and we don't always see corporate individuals showcase this specific side of them, where you actually get to see the person as who they truly are. And as someone that is in the corporate sphere and works within the corporate world, and of course has such a presence within the queer community and always speaks out on these matters, how was it for you to navigate within that sphere and actually bring this character to life authentically and honestly?
So that was one of the struggles I had with when I read the script. characterization was, as any actor and any thespian would know, that it's one of the most difficult parts because it's always easy for people to project, that it's easy for queer peoples to play queer roles. But it was quite difficult to play George in the sense that I had to navigate a lot from what was similar to his life versus mine. Whether it was the corporate, because I think ideally Philippe wanted to make this in the bank, and because I work in the bank, and I was like, no, let's change that. And I think Philippe also doesn't really touch base on, just how Kapana was a conversation that was a seed planted and then navigated to this beautiful flower. And tonight, I just need to ask the audience to please applaud for Hanga and Mikiros, because they've done a magnificent job in writing this script. Can we just give them a round of applause? So with the characterization, I had to focus quite a lot on gaining weight because I had to make sure that an HIV positive person doesn't look sick. So that was one of the things I changed. I had to navigate a lot with, getting my tattoo covered that says my name. I had to really learn how to be as brave as George and navigate in the sense that what is it like for an HIV positive person to have a family that fully accept who he is, who has a brother and a mom and an aunt that lives in the same house. So that dynamics for me was quite difficult and really truly understanding that queer doesn't mean that. And I think that's what the notion that we need to change, and that is also okay. So those were little dynamics that I could really grasp into. So Philippe and I, prior to shooting this, and all the cast members, as well as Simeon, who's Simon in real life, we spent quite a lot of time in getting to know each other, really delve into the character, what it is that we wanted, and what is it that we wanted to really bring this story to life in the most decent manner, but also saying that this is the Namibia's first LGBTQI plus family film, and really tell it as authentic and not like Philippe said, it's always dramatic, it's always where's the police brutality, it's always, when he's getting kicked, although there was a punch, but it's always so dramatic, but this is sort of like your happy ever after love story. Yeah.
I'm a little scared too.
That was beautiful to see because we don't always see a happily ever after for queer people, so that was truly beautiful. And I was even like, hey, can I sit, come on, stupid daar rest op die pavement, we do lunch gebring, kan my heel ergens dat van hier's Kapana. Hey! Jake, the other thing you said today. The food budget was crazy, I assume. Now, just before we go over to our audience question, I just want to find out, as a mother and as a woman taking on this role, we of course also know that women play a very important role in just the connection for the queer community, because queer people usually go to the females and speak to them because that's a place where we find solitude, it's a place where we find comfort. If you could give advice to anyone out there who would be like, who can I speak to? How do I approach a mother? How do I come to a woman to speak to them about this? What advice would you give any queer child out there when it comes to having that type of conversation?
Rudelio. You know what? I think if we approach someone in love, look, this movie is ultimately about love. So if a queer person approaches a woman in a loving manner, open, honest, a mother, a woman for that matter, because we are supposed to be naturally loving and kind, I cannot think that any woman could turn such a person away, because you approach in a loving manner. And this is really, it's one of the most beautiful love stories that I have personally seen on film. So it's all about love.
It is all about love. Now to my audience, ek hoop julle het lekker vrae vanaand. We have our mic right here. Can I just see one hand up first? Who has a question from our audience? Right over there. Could we just jump on right over down there, just in front of Lisa Annas? Ooh, but before the name, same.